As the Formula 1 season has gone through Spa and approaches Monza, teams are beginning to use and test low drag rear wings. But what are low drag rear wings and what effect do they have on the car when they are installed? Well, in this video we are going to answer those questions and many more. Let's do this. So as the name suggests, low drag rear wings are wings that are minimized with the sole purpose of minimizing the drag while still producing the required downforce for a Formula 1 car to complete a lap as fast as possible. So when you take a look at circuits such as Monza and compare them to circuits like the Hungaroring or Monaco, you see that the circuit characteristics could not be more different. So in tracks like the Hungaroring, teams need the wing that produces all of the downforce, but as the straights aren't too big, the car can just have a drag penalty from having those high downforce rear wings because it's going to make up for that time in the corners with where that high downforce is going to produce some faster lap time. Now, if you take a look at Spa and Monza, you'll see that a lot of the lap time is in a straight line. So now it's much more important to minimize the drag rather than to create the maximum amount of peak downforce. So in order to do this, teams produce new rear wings just for these circuits that still produce some downforce but much less than for the Hungaroring or Monaco. But what these wings are great at is minimizing the drag during the straights to allow the car to achieve the best top speed and acceleration in a straight line. So these wings can either be cut down versions of existing parts or brand new parts entirely. And in this video we are going to go to the drawing tablet to figure out the advantages and disadvantages of each concept. Let's go. Okay, so in my screen right now you can see the launch spec Alfa Romeo car. So I've picked this car because they have used a lot of different rear wing designs over the season and it's a perfect example to compare them. So here is basically the launch spec version, which is a pretty much medium rear wing design. So what do you use at circuits such as Barcelona? So a wing that doesn't have a lot of drag but can still produce a fair level of downforce. And this is the wing that the team used throughout most of the season at circuits like Jeddah, at circuits like Bahrain, at circuits like Barcelona, etc. So you can see that this wing has a fair amount of downforce, so the wing is pretty big. You can see the downforce producing parts here and here, and they create a pretty big barrier through the air. So low drag rear wings, in their essence, try to minimize the barrier that the rear wing creates with the air. So if you think about a medium downforce rear wing as a surface like this, you can imagine that this creates a much bigger barrier through the air than a low downforce wing such as this one would, where the air would just be able to curve nicely up there. And you can see that even though the downforce levels produced by this wing would be much smaller than the medium downforce one, the drag would also be much smaller. So wing downforce is basically produced due to the curvature of the wing, which is going to force the air to go at different speeds on the top and bottom of the wing, which is going to produce a high pressure region right here on top of the wing and a low pressure region below the wing. Now this in turn will produce a force that points downwards, and this is basically what plants the car to the floor. So if you reduce the curvature of the wing, such as in a low downforce rear wing, the overall level of downforce of the car is going to go down. Okay, but as I've mentioned, there are two ways of going about this problem, and now we are going to take a look at the first. So this is a rear wing that Alfa Romeo took to Spa, and this rear wing kind of looks familiar, doesn't it? Well, it's because it's about the same rear wing as this one, but basically with a big chunk here cut down, which I've marked in yellow. So you can basically see that what Alfa Romeo did was literally cut out this piece of carbon in order to reduce the drags. So as you now know, the drag is directly correlated to the curvature of the wing and to the frontal area of the wing. And now if you cut this part, now the wing has a much smaller vertical cross section. So what this means is that it's going to produce less downforce and have less drag, and this is exactly what you want for Spa. Now, why would a team such as Alfa Romeo cut down an existing rear wing instead of producing a new spec as they did? But why did they cut down this rear wing in order to try it? Well, this is basically because of the cost cap, because you want to minimize the costs of running the car. And basically by cutting down an existing wing, you are saving yourself the cost of producing an entirely new one. So this is why Alfa Romeo did this. Now this has the disadvantage of not being as effective as a design built up from the ground to be a low downforce wing, but it works very well for free practice sessions, and it works very well in the cost cap era to reduce costs and to allow the team to run to the end of the season while producing the least amount of parts possible. Now, this was not all that Alfa Romeo did, and in Saturday for qualifying, they showed up a very interesting concept of a brand new design for a low downforce rear wing, and here it is. So you can see the rear wing is very different. So if you take a look at this spec, you can see the curvature right here. This is the old spec where they just cut down the top. But if you compare it to the new spec, well, they seem to have cut down the corner of the wing. So by cutting down the corner of the wing right here, they have taken out a big chunk of the vertical cross section and therefore minimize the drag of the rear wing. So you can see right here that instead of the rounded shape, they have basically cut out this corner right here, and now the wing is much more efficient when it comes to reducing drag. But that's not that Alfa Romeo did. So if you take a look at the wing right here, you can see that the wing profile, even it's much flatter than the one that we saw before. So before we saw a wing with a much sharper turn here, which did a wing profile such as this one. Now, not only did it have a big cross section, but it was way more inclined. So what Alfa Romeo figured out was that for this race in particular, they could cut all of the downforce from this corner and still make the wing more laid down, because all of the downforce that would be required for Spa could still be produced with this yellow section right here. So this entire yellow section is producing downforce as usual, and Alfa Romeo figured out that it was enough. But what are the advantages of a design such as this one when compared to the old design where they just cut a piece of the wing out? Well, first and foremost, you're able to achieve a much better drag to downforce ratio because you're not taking out an existing wing and just cutting out a piece. You're designing a wing to be as efficient as possible from the ground up. And this in turn allows you to much better optimize the car because instead of running the car in a medium downforce configuration to suit that rear wing, you can now run the entire car in a low downforce configuration. Now, these wings have a significantly higher cost because you need to produce the entire new part instead of just cutting down an old one, and this can add up very much in the cost cap era. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of this kind of wing design. Now, when it comes to cut down wing, the advantages are that it's much cheaper to run because you just take an existing wing and then cut out a flap here on the top, and then if you want to run it again as a medium downforce wing, you can just put that flap up again by designing a new part, but you only need to replace the top part of the rear wing and not the whole assembly. Now, the fact that you have to cut down a piece of the wing while still keeping its structural integrity means that you aren't able to remove as much drag, but you also aren't able to produce as much downforce or the precise level of downforce that you would want for a racetrack such as Spa or Monza, because you effectively are just changing out an old design of rear wing. So it's much better for teams to just design a brand new rear wing for these kinds of circuits if they are allowed under the cost cap, instead of just taking a chainsaw to the old design. And you can see on your screen right now both extremes of the adaptation. So on the right you have the previously mentioned Spa rear wing that Alfa Romeo just cut down, and you can see that they even cut down through this FIA ball right here that's used to measure wing deflection. So they need to be very careful with wing deflection when they cut a piece of the rear wing, because effectively they need to make sure that the structural integrity of the wing is still there, or else they are risking being penalized. But you have here the polar opposite of this. So this is a wing design from Aston Martin that I don't think they end up running at Spa, but that they definitely will run at Monza. And you can see that now they not only reduce the top section of the wing right here, but they also curve the wing in the bottom part in order to reduce all the surface area that they could. Now, I think that this wing is a little bit too much for Spa. This wing produces too little downforce for Spa, so I think that they could not run it. But for Monza, where basically 90% of the circuit is only straight, these are the rear wings that you are going to see for the cars. But these wings also have a downturn, and that is that the effect of the RS is much less. So if you take a look at the RS right here on a Ferrari, you see that the area of the car with the RS open, I'm going to delete this so you can see better, the frontal area of the rear wing with the RS open is much smaller with the RS open. So by running a wing with higher downforce, the difference between not having the DRS open and having the DRS open is much bigger, which means that you can still have an advantage on the corners by having more downforce, but then you can have the drag benefits once the DRS is open. Whereas with a wing with so little downforce as this, the difference between DRS open and DRS close is going to be pretty much negligible in all aspects of the rear wing, with the exception of this middle part where the wing is still at its thickest. But basically in these points right here, the difference between DRS open and DRS close is pretty much negligible. So what effect these rear wings are basically having is basically the same as having the RS open through the entire lap. So this is what teams want at Monza, because it's a circuit where the straights are the name of the game. And in order to win at Monza, you need good traction, so you still need a rear wing that, even though has low drag, produces enough downforce to glue those rear tires to the ground, so you can put your pedal in the accelerator and go fast around the straight. So that's the very interesting trade-off that teams are trying to find between cost and speed for circuits such as Spa or Monza, and hopefully you now know all about it. But those are not all the tricks that teams are trying to find when it comes to rear wings. So just a few weeks ago, Aston Martin showed up with a few rear wing end plates which should be banned for 2022, and you can learn all about them in my latest video right here. So with that said, I really hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye!